Are we sure today that the original words that these people actually wrote, that were inspired by God, that they were copied over all these centuries and then kept accurately for us? So let me tell you something that might startle you, and that is that we do not have a single original manuscript. Meaning, for Mark, we don't have the papyrus that Mark actually wrote this on. What we do have are ancient copies of those manuscripts that allow us to reconstruct the originals with tremendous precision. And so for the sake of comparison, what I want to do is just show you a few other ancient works that historians today consider to be absolutely credible, and we actually base our knowledge of those times and even the whole Roman Empire on the basis of these materials. So just notice just two of them by comparison. Caesar, he wrote the book called Gallic Wars. He wrote it around 50 BC, okay? Close to the time of Jesus, 50 years before. We do not have his original manuscript. What we have are only 10 copies of that manuscript, and the earliest of those copies is 950 years after it was written. Livy wrote Roman history in AD 29, which is right about the time that Jesus rose from the dead. We do not have his manuscript that he wrote. What we have today are only 20 copies. And the earliest of those copies is dated to the 14th century. And yet, historians today tell us that not only are these two credible sources for the Roman Empire, but we based almost all of our teaching about the Roman Empire on these two sources. Now compare that to the New Testament alone. It was written AD 48 to 90. And today, we do not have not a single manuscript of any of those letters. But what do we have? We have 5,800 complete copies of the New Testament in Greek and 15,000 of them in other languages. And the earliest of those actually is dated to just 75 years after the last one was finished, which is the Gospel of John. Now, what you find is this wealth of preservation, it creates both problems and solutions. You see, before we could make photocopies on a machine, the Bible, which was in the 14th century, we actually had to hand copy these letters because people wanted to read them. And they wanted to get the Bible out to as many people as possible. Well, the more handwritten copies of anything, the more variants or scribal errors you're going to find. But don't you understand? But also, the more you have, the more control we have to know which mirror the original by comparing one to another. For example, if we had only 2 copies of Mark and only 2 copies, and one of them included verses 9 through 20, and the other one didn't, we'd have a real hard time to know if we should be looking at this. But if you have 5,800 in Greek and 15,000 in other languages for comparison, there's more to compare to know what Mark originally wrote. And keep in mind that the vast majority, I'm talking about over 95%, the vast majority of all the variants, all those human errors in copying are spellings and accidental duplications and inverting word order, one word with another. And you can imagine that. If I gave you the Bible and it said, I want you to record it exactly as it is, and once you finish it the first time, I'm going to have you write it another time and then another time, you'd probably misspell a word too. We all would. But what's remarkable is 99.5% of the original manuscripts of all the books of the Bible can be reconstructed today beyond reasonable doubt, and there's not one single Christian doctrine that is built on a disputed passage. And to be above reproach, the literary scientists who believe the Bible to be true and full of credibility intentionally marks every variant by either adding brackets or by placing a footnote in the margin.